Okay, we got the recording is in session. Let me just pull up the chat. Where's the chat? Someone say something. Perfect. There it goes. Okay, I got the chat back. So first and foremost, I want to introduce everyone into the course. My name is Dr. Nicholas Anthony, and I'm the instructor for this and other neuroscience courses for the faculty. This course is KINE 2110, and it is it is human motor control and learning. And so what I really wanted to do briefly was just introduce the topic and talk about what the expectations for the course are and how everything is sort of structured. And then we can get into a lecture on the material. Now, I was asking people just before the lecture started about what their experience is in with maybe understanding some of the topics that would be introduced in this course. And it seems like an open book, like a lot of you haven't done anything specific to this, but I do find that as KINE grads, you'll find this very applicable to the things that you're learning in your other courses and the things that you notice in sort of daily life. And it should be something that excites you and you find worthwhile. I don't think that any of the material is difficult. Now, a prerequisite is Intro to Movement Neuroscience, but you'll find that this course is a lot less heavy in terms of the anatomy material, and it's more looking at studies that have evaluated how we control movement. And because as clinicians, as kinesiology students, you're all probably going to go on to different professional degrees and a wide range of different fields. What you'll find is that this course is going to sort of teach you, if we understand how we control movement, then we can better understand how to fix it in a clinical setting or in a training setting. So if we understand sort of the specifics of how our body pieces things together to learn or to control our body, then we can come up with treatment plans or training regimes that sort of maximize the way that we work. So if you think about like a guy that, or a person, a mechanic that's fine-tuning a race car, if they understand how the engine works, how the machinery works of the vehicle, they can fine-tune it to optimize the performance of the vehicle in a race. And so that would be the analogy of what we're learning in relation to the body today and for the course. Any questions so far? Anyone? Jennifer had originally asked a question about when lectures would be and this hypothetical Saturday lecture. Lectures will be on Fridays at this time. And then the labs and the assignments and the quizzes will all be online on your own time, okay? Now you can see that the course is divided up into different labs that you had. Yes, lectures are being recorded for sure. The lectures from the last time that I taught the course are online right now, and they've been posted in Canvas. I just did it in case people wanted to go ahead and sort of watch the lectures. It changes a bit every year, and I find that the interaction obviously changes with the different groups. Every cohort or every class has its own sort of identity in the way that we ask questions. And so what I'll do is I will post, obviously, the recordings of this lecture on that. But for now, the old ones are posted if you wanted to move ahead. But I wanted to just get across with what's going on with the labs. Now, because of sort of the COVID situation and the ever-changing restrictions, what we've done is we've decided to have the labs all virtual. And so I know that you had all picked scheduled times to attend labs that were going to be week 1 versus week 2. That's no longer the case. And so what's going to happen is that the labs are going to be all on your own time. And what you're going to be required to do is you're going to log on the Canvas, and you can see that for every lab, there's a sort of updated lab protocol. You would click on that lab protocol, and it's going to be a Kaltura video, sort of introducing why we would want to do the lab, how you would do it in a real laboratory setting, and sort of the specifics behind it. And then associated with that video will be a Kaltura quiz, much like Intro to Movement Neuroscience, where I have the embedded quiz. That's what it's going to be like. So you would complete that protocol, and then there's sample data that's posted, and then you would complete the lab on your own time with the sample data that you would have hypothetically collected, and submit that lab report through Turnitin. There are 5 different labs, and each lab will be worth 4%. The Kaltura protocol quiz will be 1%, and then the lab report will be 3%, for a total of 4% per lab. Yes, lectures will continue online as well. So if restrictions do change, we may have the opportunity where I would have like a drop-in if people want to try out the lab, just for not for credit, but just for information's sake. We can maybe arrange something like that if things change in February or March. But rather than change, because you guys are going to get used to a certain sort of rhythm, I find that we'll stick with the same rhythm that it is now. And then if there is an opportunity for you guys to go in and do some things in real life, that would be great and fun. But it wouldn't be for credit. It would just be for more interest. So that way it wouldn't stress you guys out. Let me pull up the syllabus, because I do want to show you how things are due. But first, as I said, that the labs are going to be 20% of your mark. Online quizzes are posted right now, I believe. And what they are is that there's going to be 2 quizzes before the midterm and 2 quizzes that are after the midterm due before the final. And what they are a group of sample questions. There's about 50 questions, and then you can log in and log out and answer them as we go along. The first quiz is going to be on lectures 1 to 4. The second one will be 5 and 6. And then the third one is 7, 8, and then the last one would be on lectures 9 and 10, and it's on that material. And what it is that it's each one is about 2.5% for a total of 10% of your final grade. But what it does is it gives you sample questions to sort of test out your knowledge base on the material, just to ensure that you're sort of learning. And then, like I said, you can log in and log out. The first 2 are due before the midterm, and then the last 2 are due before the final. The midterm will be on March 9th in class, and it will be done through Respondus virtually, of course. And the assignment is going to be sort of a write-up, and the rubric is listed right now. You can look it up. I would say it's going to take parts of all of the different lectures and get you to evaluate a motor skill. And we'll learn what that term means, motor skill. But what you want to do is you're going to apply the knowledge base of the different lectures into a small assignment, and that assignment will be worth 20%, and the rubric and everything is outlined immediately, and it can be visible right now. And then the final exam, I'm not sure the date yet, but will be virtual as well, and it will be worth 27%. So let me pull up the syllabus just to show you guys sort of the schedule with everything. Start presenting. Do you guys see the syllabus? Perfect. Okay. Any questions so far? It should be available right now. So I think that if you go into the modules, there'll be, you know what it is? It's because it opens up after the lecture is done today, I think. No, Ashad, the midterm and the final will be virtual, and then we had another question from Jacob. Once you're about the labs, once you're done though. Okay, so one question that I will bring up from Jacob. The labs are all virtual on your own time, but what's going to happen is that we do have the TAs that are going to mark the labs, of course, but they are willing to do a drop-in session weekly, so that way you guys can log in to a specified Google Meets link that they would provide, where you can ask questions about the protocol and as well as answering the lab report questions. And we wanted to take a poll to see when you guys would prefer that time. So I don't know how to do a poll on Google Meets. We'll do that at the end of the class. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Let's see it. So Caitlin, in terms of talking about when the labs are due, so the lab, so let's say lab 1 is going to be due right before lab 2 starts, or lab 2 would be open. So you basically have 2 weeks to do every lab. Yeah, so Jacob, right now the lab times that are posted aren't relevant really because it's on your own time. Yeah, so it would be the time. So Alexis is asking a question. It says the labs are due at the beginning of the subsequent lab. So it would be due the day that you would have had the subsequent lab. Yeah, I'm looking at the options, Matthew, and I don't see the poll, but we can do it at the end. Just to figure out a better time that you would all agree on. That would be a drop-in time to meet with the TAs. The midterm would be during class time, so that would be a Friday. So, oh yeah, it's the 11th. That would be a typo in the lecture slides. So I'll change that and repost it. Sorry. Okay, so this is the schedule of breakdown of the semester, and so here we are right today. So technically, labs would have started next week. So the 31st and the 1st of February, or 2 weeks, sorry. But like I was saying, the labs are all virtual now. So what's going to happen is that you would all start the lab here, and it's going to be due in 2 weeks before the start of what would have been the second lab. Does that answer your? I think it was Alexis that was asking. Does that make sense? And then so I would have lab 2 done or due before the next lab, which would be electrical signals. So there you go. There's a bit of a break here for study week, but that sort of system works on throughout the course. Yeah, no, there isn't anymore. So Samantha was saying there's no week 1 or week 2 anymore. No, that's not the case. So does everyone get that? So the labs are going to be all virtual. Just to review, you're going to log in. You're going to do the protocol quiz. That's 1%. You're going to complete the lab report. That's the extra 3%. And it's going to be due before the beginning of the subsequent lab. So that's about 2 weeks. There is going to be a drop-in time for you to meet with TAs so it's not attendance or anything, but if you want to drop in and ask questions or listen to people asking questions, because the majority of you all have the same questions. And it's a good time to get like a live Q&A with the TA about it. And rather than like having 17,000 emails to the TA of the same question each day, it's better for them and for all of you to sort of get it all together. Okay. Remember, we have 2 quizzes for the first half and 2 quizzes after before the final, and they are log in and complete on your own time. You can log in, log out, answer the questions, go back, change them. There's no time limit. It's just so that way you can test yourself, because we're going to learn in motor learning, but it's true of all learning, is that by testing yourself, it really helps you retain the information. So I wanted to put some, so it's 50 each, but 50 questions, so you can go through and answer. It would be like 12 questions per lecture was what it goes out to be. But at least it allows you to test yourself on the material. So when you get to the midterm and to the final, you're better prepared to answer those questions. And then we have a final due at midnight on the last day of classes. Everyone cool? Promise? Awesome. Karen was that too difficult to type out? I apologize. Okay, awesome. I like this Karen, guys. I like everybody, but Karen is a good part of the team. So I am now going to share the lecture again. Let me know when it comes up. Yeah, okay, perfect. So this is the textbook for the course, and I don't know, you guys haven't had me before, right? So I'll say what I always say, that the textbook is there to help you learn more material surrounding the material in the course. This textbook is actually a very good one. The last class that I was teaching said that this kind of looks like me, and I have to agree. I like this one. But unfortunately, it's not me. They did provide me with a free textbook, so I will give them that. But this textbook is a really good one. Now, motor control and learning research is a newer field, right? It started sooner, just like neuroscience, than some of our traditional courses. Now, the one good thing about this textbook in relation to this material is that we talk a lot about the different studies that were done for each lecture and why they were done and what the results showed. This goes into more depth of what the results and what the studies were, so it helps you understand the material a lot better. What I would do is I would probably go through a couple lectures, probably try out some of the questions on the those quizzes, and then if you're getting them, then you understand the material quite well. If you feel like you still need some more information, some more learning to help you really, grasp those concepts and be able to answer those questions confidently, then the textbook or a free PDF that someone could post would be a great option. Is it okay? So do we all understand the textbook? There is an online one too. See? So there's actually a 12th edition. The 11th one is what I have, and it worked great. I don't know what they change each time. If you do, okay, so I will big them up a little bit. If you do get the online one, it comes with like different videos and stuff. So there's different like interactive stuff that you could get. Yeah. We have a request. I can't post it obviously on the website or anything, but yeah. Jake's right now the most popular guy in this class. That's scary. Okay, so like I was saying, that this class builds on the concepts that you learned in Intro to Movement Neuroscience. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I had said that there's different levels of how to evaluate neuroscience, and this course is looking at the cognitive behavioral aspects of how we control our movement. So what is sort of the basis behind how we integrate information to be able to achieve skillful movement? The course topics are going to include several things. Two of them are so half the course is going to be motor control, and then half the course will be motor learning, which are both sort of obviously related to each other, and we'll learn why. But the first half of the course is going to first look at the classification and measurement of motor performance. Now, think about how to analyze someone doing a motor skill. It's observationally a hard concept to grasp. How can you grade someone on their ability to throw a ball? Someone give me a sporting task. Long jump, okay. Running, sure. Slap shot, batting. Now, are all of those the same type of motor skill? So is batting a baseball the same as picking up a cup? Is it controlled the same? Probably not, right? But what's the difference? So research started from, and you'll learn this, that it came out of psychology or behavioral psychology, and it was looking at we need to come up with a sort of field that will analyze human movement, and we got to figure out how to analyze it. And then the second thing is that if you have two people that are picking up a cup to drink out of it, how do you know one is better than the other? Because a lot of our research methods are classifying and measuring or quantifying the whatever you're analyzing to see how different variables alter your performance or alter whatever you're studying. And so that was a problem with early motor control and learning research because we're trying to develop methods to analyze motor skills. We're going to evaluate the role of different sensory processes because think of like hand-eye coordination, or have you ever heard of, okay, we're talking about baseball. When people are learning to play baseball, what do the coaches say? Look at the ball, look at the ball, look at the ball. Because it tends to be in humans that we rely mostly on our sense of vision to, pick out certain things in the environment so that we can achieve the skill of what we're trying to do. And so we need to look at what is the role of different sensory processes when doing motor skills, because some will impact and be necessary for some motor skills and others will be not. And then what happens if you get better at something? All of a sudden you rely less heavily on certain sensory processes, right? So what do you notice about, and is there any dancers in the class? Any TikTokers? And no. Oh, there you go. Okay. So Michaela is a ballet dancer. And Jonathan only dances when he's alone. That's perfect. And Hannah dances. Okay, great. But when you're learning a dance routine or learning how to dance, you initially look at your feet. You're looking at the movements of your body to help you learn that task. And then as you get better, you stop that. You can rely more on your proprioception. Just dance absolutely counts, Jaden. So that's an example of how we, obviously we use our sensory processes to complete motor skills, but then as we get better at a motor skill or as we learn it, it changes. And so we need to understand that, because if we're going to put this information into a clinical or training setting or a rehab setting, then if we understand how things work, we can optimize healing or optimize training or learning. We're going to look at memory and attention. So another example of sort of something that we've all learned is that think about multitasking, or if you're doing multiple things at once. What's one thing that we notice? If we're doing multiple things at once, what tends to happen to the performance of the multiple things that you're doing in comparison to doing them each individually? Exactly. For whatever reason, your brain, because think about it, we've learned different motor skills. So there's something about doing two things at once, or three things, or four things even, that doesn't allow us to work at an optimal level. So what's the factor behind that? And it's related to attention, or we have like a sort of like an ability or a maximum amount of attention that we can subdivide between tasks. And that was something that was learned through research. But as you get better and better at something, you become an expert and it takes less attention. Then you can multitask better. Just like when we're playing sports. When all of a sudden, does anyone play sports? Can't agree. Obviously everyone plays sports, I guess. But what is one thing that coaches or athletes say as they get better? The game starts to slow down. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that. But that comes from the idea that because now you are less focused on all individual things because you're becoming an expert at it, it takes less attention. You can now look at the environment better and pick out certain things. It's not like time is slowing down. It's that you are having to rely less on cognitively controlling your body because it's all becoming a rhythm, and then you can sort of evaluate the environment more. Yeah, exactly, Samantha. Malak saying something I was talking about. It's piggybacking. Yeah, so that's another thing about attention, is that you can focus. If you're concentrating too much on certain things, that's what your brain is going to pick out. And on that note, Malak, what about choking? Do you guys know what the term choking is? Choking is when athletes in stressful situations, they're not very clutch. Well, what's happening? They're, like what Malak was saying, what we've realized through research is that they're overthinking. they're breaking down their normal rhythm, and they're overthinking and worried about specific aspects, and then it all ends up happening. They ruin the motor program that they've developed. Yeah. So Alexis is right. So we're all saying the same thing, right? And I mean, maybe it's probably because we're all from a KINE background, and so we all have probably had the similar interests growing up. But these are all things that we've realized already, right? So now we got to research it and understand really the specifics of it, because it allows us to optimize rehab, clinical stuff, and training. And then the last part of the course is we're talking about feedback and practice. So if we understand how we control and learn in terms of motor skills, then we can figure out the best ways to optimize learning sessions. So if anyone's learning a new sport or is teaching or coaching, there's always like, you get like 3 times a week for an hour for how many weeks? There's a set limited of time. So you really want to you can optimize that time to really have the learners learn the most. Any questions so far, guys? So that was just me trying to big up the class a little bit, get you guys all excited. Hope that worked. This is when you say, yes, it worked. I'm so excited. Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, I got 3 hype men already. Thank you. So this is what I'm just saying in the course. Today's lecture, so I'm just going to introduce the terms motor control, motor learning, what that actually means. We're going to talk about some terms that are used a lot in the research. And those terms were created because they needed to come up with specifics, because there's different schools that we're all going to, okay, we're all going to start learning or researching human movement and human motor control and learning. We need some terms that we can use globally so that we all are speaking the same language. Ryan thinks I'm funny. Thank you. I'm just getting started. And we'll finish off with the classification of motor skills. So if we're researching anything, you have to be able to quantify stuff, which is pretty difficult to do when we're thinking about observable movement. And so we'll finish off with, well, obviously why you need to do that, but the ways that we started in research. I have a quick video to sort of, oh, I screwed up. I have a quick video just to introduce you to the topic. And I wanted to play it because it's interesting for you guys as KINE grads. Just confirm for me that you can hear it. And I like using YouTube videos because if you click on the CC option at the bottom, it automatically closed captions it for you. So anything that I post would immediately be closed caption. Even the lectures, because I post them on YouTube for that reason.
Control is an important and rapidly expanding discipline.
Oh, so, see? Sorry, guys. Round 2. Okay.
Motor learning control is an important and rapidly expanding discipline. It is the study of how motor skills are acquired and developed, and is important in rehabilitation and performance. This video will cover the history, some theories and models, and the future uses of motor learning and control.
Motor learning and control really just became a research area in the 70s, though there was research done similar to what we consider motor learning and control research. So a psychologist named Franklin Henry was doing a lot of motor learning research. And in that motor learning research, it was considered part of psychology because it's like controlled by the brain, etc. So he was really interested in how humans acquire and control skilled movement. So he was writing a lot of research about findings about pre-processing and etc. And he wrote a seminal paper saying, and I think it was published in 71 or 72, saying we need to move away from psychology, move away from physiology, move away from like other tangential areas and create a kinesiology. He suggested using the term kinesiology and create a more scientific society where we do our own research. We have our own societies, like the North American Society for the Study of Sports Psychology and all different kinds of cognition. So he actually created that society. So his work, and he was an instructor at Berkeley, and Dr. Schmidt, who is at UCLA and has a bunch of theories out there, was his student. So Franklin Henry pretty much consolidated the area that we now know as motor learning and motor control, and through many papers saying we need to do our own research and be more scientific and get into human factors, not just mental factors or whatever.
The first model is simple and choice reaction time. Simple reaction time has only one choice and a quick response time. While choice has many choices, is a longer reaction time, and the more choices available, the longer reaction time. Next is the Fitz and Posner learning model. The first stage is the cognitive stage, where there are many errors and gross movements. The next is the associated stage. There are less errors and the person gets slowly better at the skill. The final stage is the autonomous stage, where there are few or no errors and the person does not need to pay attention to the task because their movements are autonomous. Next is discrete versus continuous skills. First, we have a discrete skill, where there is a clear beginning and end to the task, versus a continuous skill, where there is no clear beginning and end, such as a person jogging by. Next is open or closed environments. An open environment is where there are environmental factors to consider, such as another person to rally with, or going against a defender in basketball. In a closed environment, there are no environmental factors, such as shooting a free throw alone. Next, we have fine versus gross skills. A fine motor skill uses very small muscle groups, while a gross motor skill will utilize many muscle groups and use large ones.
So that video is helpful just to give you a background in the field. And then it also introduces some of the topics that we're going to finish off this lecture with and talk about throughout the course. But one interesting thing that came out of, hopefully came out of the video for you, is that it's actually this field, this research that developed the program that you guys have all chosen to be a part of, which is kinesiology. It originally started as behavioral psychology, and people wanted to evaluate what different variables affected someone's ability to control their movement. And then they, like in the video, woman said, they all came together and said, we need to create a new field that will analyze human movement. And fast forward 40 years later, and here we are. Cool, right? The other thing that the video sort of introduced, that it's difficult to analyze movement, and so the research progressed with different ways and different sort of things or variables that they could use to analyze motor skills, and that would allow us to understand or to develop a knowledge base in human movement, and it gives us an idea of how we control our movements. Any questions so far, Sky? Any questions so far, people? Awesome. So let's get into sort of the lecture material. So why do we want to study this? And hopefully I did a good job of introducing the topic to get you guys all excited. But what is the benefit of learning of this information, right? I know you're all kinesiology grads, but I really want to make you guys interested because it's going to sort of spur your interest not only this class, but in wherever you sort of end up in your academic or professional career. So Olu, which part did you want me to repeat? Before now. I think I was just kind of reviewing the video. Yep.
So you were explaining some. You were just saying something before, like before you came here. I spaced out a little. I just wanted to ask if you could go back to what you said.
What did you hear up to?
So after the video.
Just that this is so the human and motor control research is what spurred the development of the kinesiology program. Like before that, kinesiology wasn't a term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No. Well, why do we want to study motor learning? And the reason is because even as kinesiology grads, there's so much that can be utilized in understanding how we control movement in all different ranges of different fields in health and in sports performance. Now, when we're all born with the ability to move, but just like animals, we develop the ability to move skillfully and manipulate the environment in the way that we see fit. And humans are unrivaled in their ability compared to other animals in their ability to manipulate the environment, to find stuff, find movements, and then also learn movements, right? The ability to interact with our environment is a biological imperative. So think of like all of the things that we need to do to survive, to live, eat, drink, travel, groom, interact with others. All of that is motor skills that we have learned, right? As a little baby, obviously there's things that are movements that are ingrained within us or types of movements that we are prone to, like, sort of based on our anatomy, but we learn those motor skills throughout our infant life and continue on throughout the rest of our lives. We learn or have an ability to learn skills until we pass. And so what is it about humans that makes us have such a great ability to perform fine movements and learn from others? So let me ask you about a process. Like what is a way that we will get better at a motor skill, right? If we decide that we need to cross a path, like, so let's say there is, I'm standing here, there's a hill, and then there's, an apple tree, and I'm hungry. How am I going to learn how to get across that, hill or valley? Think of like caveman times. Trial and error, exactly. And that's how humans process. Is there trial and error, figuring out different things? And then that process of trial and error really integrates or ingrains that information in our brain in terms of a motor skill. The other thing that we can do to optimize it is that humans are really, I would say probably the best in the animal kingdom at being able to watch another person perform that task and then mimic it. Sensorily wise, they're able to envision someone and then they can take in that information and then it would speed it up. So it changes the amount of trial error that's required. Yeah, exactly. And there's parts of the brain that do that, and that's something that we have learned. But the point of what I'm trying to say is that our ability to move with purpose or ability to perform goal-oriented movement is called, in research, the performance of motor skills. So movement can be purposeless. Like I could just be doing something without purpose. What we're studying or talking about in this course is the performance of motor skills, voluntary movement of our body to perform a specific goal or to achieve a specific goal. Here we have a video of a little baby, and it sort of just takes home a lot of these points. This is motor learning research and just points out the fact that here we have a baby that doesn't really have a good grasp of coordination or control of her body, but she's working through trial and error.
They often face the challenge of new surfaces, of hills and valleys of varying degrees. The body must learn how to adapt, and the mind must decide what's safe and what's risky. Hannah is 14 months. How she decides to negotiate the ramp as it gets steeper and steeper will depend on how much experience moving around on her own she's already had. Each new attempt places more demand on her for control of her movements. This incline looks like more than she can handle. Her feet pat the ground and deliver the message. This problem needs another solution. Dr. Adolf ups the ante.
This isn't really safe for the baby.
But the situation has gotten out of hand. Hannah tries to explain the problem. She gives it a try, but it's time to call for help. Hannah is in a pickle. Even though she has a lot of knowledge about her physical abilities, this time she prefers to depend on an adult to help her find another strategy. Experience has taught her that this slope is just too.
So that is showing trial and error. So this is a little baby that's learning. What else that can happen is that we can be shown what to do, and we will take that in and optimize our learning. Jonathan has a question. When babies are involved in physical tests, it's an older bit. Yeah. That would not fly nowadays, 100%. They would have like a simulation. So, like I was saying, obviously the two topics in this course, which are in relation to each other, are motor control and motor learning. Now, what is the difference between motor control and learning? Well, they're similar in the sense that they all evaluate motor skills. They're both looking or analyzing our ability to perform motor skills. And like I said, motor skills are our voluntary control of our body or movement of our body to achieve a particular goal. So it's purposeful movement. Motor learning is evaluating the acquisition of motor skills. So what's the processes of us learning motor skills? How the performance enhancement of learned or highly known skills. So how do we take someone that's good at something and then optimize them into even better performance? Or and we also want to look at the reacquisition of skills following injury or disease. So all of these three topics involve motor learning. We're evaluating the learning of motor skills originally to optimize from like a good person, like an amateur to a pro, and how to reacquire skills that you've lost as a result of sort of a non-neurological impairment or some other type of injury. Now, I had asked you guys before, and I forget who said trial and error, but what is the process of us learning? It's trial and error and repetition. And so the processes of us learning a motor skill involves practice. And with practice, we develop an improved ability or capability to achieve that task. Does anyone work with kids, like training them or teaching them or coaching them? Now, what is one thing that you notice about kids that are learning a new dance routine or a new sport? Because I just don't know what you guys teach them for. They're timid, yeah. What about their movements? Yeah, exactly. Their movements are large, and even said they're uncoordinated, and that's what happens, right? With practice, the coordination tends to improve. Exactly. And so and this is the problem with studying motor learning, is that it's all observational. We're observationally watching things that would allow us to infer that they're learning. Think about like when you guys are doing like these courses, the way to, check to make sure that you guys are learning is they give you tests. It's a little bit more difficult with motor skill and evaluating learning. You could look at someone's performance and, let's say, okay, how fast did it take you to run this? And then you're getting better. How fast can you run now? Learning is sort of inferred, and we tend to have to try to quantify stuff to sort of evaluate it. And so that what's the problem with learning is that it's inferred, it's observational. The other thing too is that what about the old sort of saying that you never forget how to ride a bike? One interesting thing is that when we learn motor skills, through the process of trial and error and developing this motor program on the inside of how to do something, we never really forget how to do a motor skill once we've learned it. Yeah, that term muscle memory, Ryan, was what he's saying. It comes from that. Weird, right? Our body remembers the motion or the movement specifics to perform a motor skill. We never really forget it. We can get rusty if we haven't done it in a while, but it tends to come back really quick. That means that that information or that process never really leaves our brain. Interesting. Whereas, like, if I could ask you guys, like, okay, what was the third slide on the lecture, the A&P lecture, and it's going to be a lot harder to remember that if I'm going to ask you specifics of sort of a cognitive thing that you learned last year. Motor skills have this relatively permanent sort of variable that is something that is important to understand. Motor
Sorry, I
control.
had a question.
Yep. Go.
Oh, sorry. What's the reason again behind why we forget certain things, but when it comes like to riding a bike or walking, we don't forget that throughout our whole life? We learn it once, and yeah.
Well, yeah. So just we'll have like a lecture on it specifically. So then, like, I'll get into way more depth. But when learning a motor skill, it's not that we do it once and then we remember it. It's the process. It's trial and error, and cognitively and physically, that mass repetition of doing it allows us to really have that permanently in our head. So what happens is that with repetition, your body is remembering the trial and error process. It's like, okay, if this happens and this happens, and we do this. It's the repetition that really makes it permanent. And when you guys are learning classes, that repetition technically isn't there. Really, if we wanted to learn from motor skills and do like cognitive skills like academics and school better, it's the trial and error of testing yourself and asking questions and that repetition that we tend not to do for a lot of different reasons, right? But with motor skills, it's that repetition that that allows it to really sink into our brain. Yeah.
So in theory, it's possible to kind of learn something and remember it, like a cognitive task, remember it forever as well. Is that what it is?
Yeah, like, I don't know if you guys are working right now, but if you've been like clinical experience or you've been working the same job for 20 years, you're not going to forget stuff, right? Because you have that repetition. It's just hard because you guys are doing like 5 classes at once. You don't have that repetition. But you know how they say, like, if you really want to learn a course, do cue cards, test yourself, review the lectures, quiz each other. It's because it's the repetition of analyzing the information in different ways. The majority of us just like try to read the lectures once and like we cram, right? So then cramming obviously isn't going to cause us to permanently learn it. If you wanted to learn how to shoot a basketball and I give you a basketball and I go, okay, this is how you do it, watch, shoot it, and then you do it once, you're not going to be able to permanently learn that, right? Jaden had a question. Yeah, exactly. Does that make sense? Awesome. So with motor control, like I said, motor control, we're learning motor skills, or evaluating motor skills. Motor learning, you're evaluating motor skills. With motor control, we're trying to analyze motor skills from looking at the sort of behavioral or neuromuscular mechanisms that produce the coordinated movement. So what is it about the interaction with the environment that we pick in that allows us to coordinate our body? And then how is what we're taking in allow us to fixate our body or sort of fine tune our body to move in a particular way? And then with motor control is when we're learning a new motor skill. So when we talk about kids and they're uncoordinated, and then when they've practiced for many years and now they're really, really good, is the control process the same? Because it looks different. So neurologically, is the control different or the same? And they didn't know, right? They were like, well, what's the difference? What's the difference when someone that's learning a new skill, the control process behind when they learn the skill and they're really good at it, is it the same, or what's the difference? And so that was the sort of impetus of motor control research. Because then if you can understand what they do better or how they do things or control things better when you are really good at something, then you could teach that to other people and optimize control or learning. And there's different ways to analyze motor skills from a motor control perspective. We can do it observationally and behaviorally, like we're talking about right now. You could analyze it biomechanically and use, I don't know if you guys have taken biomechanics yet, but maybe as you get better, you are biomechanically more efficient. Your body is like done the trial and error and become more efficient. And looking at it from a math perspective or physics perspective will allow us to understand how it became to that. Because I don't know if you guys ever watch like sports science and then they look at the biomechanics of different athletes and the way that they do things, they're able to generate so many, Newton or Newton meters of force, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen those. There's some videos that I'll post in the different lectures. Okay, so then there you go. So then maybe the trial and error and the coordination, the biomechanics are better, and that is what happens too, right? That's a factor. Like I'll let you guys in on like a little secret, straight off the press. But as you get better at a motor skill, you're able to pick out in the environment what you really need to know. If you look at like a new driver, they're like looking all around, looking at everything. Whereas if you looked at an experienced driver, like all of us, or even like obviously older people, the way that they look is they're looking at less things for less amount of time. So quick look at the road, quick look at the rear view mirror. Like they are more efficient in what they need from the environment. That's the most important to achieve that task, and that will happen with trial and error. And then the last thing is we can actually use like EMG and different neurophysiological techniques, and we can look at what are the activation patterns or how those change when we control our neuromuscular system, and then evaluate like I was saying, the different variables of how important different sensory processes are and how that changes as how we learn. Because remember, when we're learning a motor skill, you're like heavy in using vision, and then as you get better, you can better use proprioception. That's another thing that they learned in research, which is something that we all sort of already observationally understood probably, but it was this sort of research that already started putting together laws and the real like sort of information behind it. Am I going too fast? Or you guys okay? Is it good? Olu? You good? Okay. Let's continue on. So this is why we want to study motor control. Motor development is, I don't know if you guys have had it yet, but I think Megan Lloyd teaches it. This is a whole other course. But what they're looking at is they're using and evaluating motor skills as well, but they're looking at the development of motor skills and how it changes from infancy to old age. So this is not what we're going to generally talk about in this course, but this topic, motor development, is in relation to motor control and learning and in kinesiology. Yeah. And some of the terms that you probably learned in that course with Megan or Dr. Lloyd, sorry, were going to be some of the same terms that you are going to learn in this course. So what are the different variables? And Malak said this, so I don't know if you read ahead or you just know this, but what are different factors that are things to consider or that influence our ability with performing motor skills? Hint, it's listed on the slide right here. But what research has shown is that when they decided they were going to start evaluating motor skills, they figured out the three main things that influence our ability to complete a motor skill that we've learned. And those include the motor skill itself, how hard or difficult it is. If it's something very like small and easy to do, that's going to factor in how good we're able to perform that skill. Or what if it's something very difficult, like playing like some very, obscure, very like long piano piece. So it's a much more difficult motor skill to perform, and so it's going to take a longer time to learn that. It's going to be harder to do. Another variable is the performance environment. So think about when, think about, does anyone play basketball? Okay. Is it easier to shoot a free throw or to take a jump shot when you're on the move and there's a defender in front of you? Right. So this is an example of how the environment affects your ability to perform a skill. Obviously, that's still a jump shot or shooting the basketball in each of those examples. But depending on the environment, and if things are moving, or if you have to accommodate more information or integrate more sensory information from the environment, your body has to process, your brain has to process more stuff to perform that motor skill. And so what happens is that the performance environment, or what's going on around you, is going to factor in our ability to achieve that task, as well as when things are, stable. And then the last thing is, when Malak was talking about choking, the internal factors of the person performing the motor skill will also influence the person. Because what happens think about like performing a free throw. Because we're talking about it, what do you see the crowd doing behind it? They're trying to do stuff to make the athlete lose focus and get stressed, because internally, if you're stressed, or the internal factors are also going to play a part in whether or not we're able to achieve a skill. Have any of you noticed that when you're stressed, you're like less able to perform a motor skill better? Yeah. So overall, it gives us three different variables, and this is sort of the point of today's lecture, but also the point of the course, is that our motor skill performance is going to be based on three factors: the person, or the internal factors, the environment, or the external factors, as well as the difficulty of the skill itself. These three factors combined are going to tell us whether or not we're capable of achieving the motor skill, better or worse than when we're learning. Any questions about that, guys? Awesome. So now let's just talk briefly about some terms that were put together by the different researching bodies at the different universities as this research was being developed in the 70s and 80s. The terms that we're going to learn for this lecture are skills, actions, and movements, as well as the term neuromotor processes. And we're bringing them up because those terms are going to be used throughout the course. The term skill is synonymous with motor skill. Skill means motor skill. So what was a motor skill that we defined like 5 slides ago? It was the voluntary coordination or movement of our body, or the joints of our body, to achieve a particular goal. So it's a goal-oriented movement. That's called skill or motor skill. And think about the difference. So if I wink, so like let's say I'm trying to get I'm trying to get Karen, the note taker's, attention, and I'm giving her a little nonverbal communication. I'm consciously controlling the flexion of my eyelid. Whereas if I get something in my eye, see how like there's a reflex. So do you understand the difference between a skill versus a reflex? A blink and a wink are the same movement, but one is purposeful and one is not controlled by cognitively. And so wink and blinks are similar movements, but very different neural characteristics. So what we're looking at in this course is motor skills, so the voluntary control of our movements. Don't get confused because like in English or as an adjective, the term skilled can also be used to talk about someone that's performing a motor skill with maximum certainty, with maximum efficiency, like they're very good and they're very consistent, and they are very coordinated, or that they tend to achieve the task with minimal effort. So when I say that, think about a really good athlete. Someone name someone. LeBronto. So LeBron, he's kind of old right now, but we'll talk about LeBron. LeBron would be a skilled athlete for basketball, and why? What are some of the characteristics? He is able to always achieve certain aspects of the sport with maximum certainty. He looks effortless. He's able to do it under a wide range of conditions. He can, you know, he's not the best shooter, but he can shoot and perform in clutch situations. He can do it. He can do a jump shot if someone is a defender, if he's fading away, if he's off balance. He breaks all them ankle. Caesar he's 37. Yeah, it's like, so unfortunately for professional athletes, that counts as old. But he's experienced. One question that we always get in the course is like sort of what's the difference between a motor skill versus a cognitive skill? Okay, so Caesar really likes LeBron, and I want to be honest with you, I am a LeBron fan. The sport has never seen someone like him. I wouldn't say he's playing like he's 20, just based on if you look at all the young guys, they're very like think of like Trey Young and stuff, like they're all over the place. Whereas like a veteran, they are more efficient with their movements. They pick their spots. He can still have like power in the dynamic burst, and he can jump and he can dunk, but he's much more refined in his movements than when he was with Cleveland the first time. And that just goes to talk about what we see as we get better, right? With motor skills, you become more efficient. You are able to achieve maximum certainty under a wide range of conditions. You know what to do and when to do it. You don't get as stressed with like clutch situations. This has become a lecture on LeBron, which is great. Okay, but there's always going to be a cognitive aspect of a lot of the different motor skills that we are sort of evaluating, or things that you do in your daily life. When we're talking about the difference between a motor skill versus a cognitive skill, a motor skill is the maximization of the moment, of the movement. Sorry, the movement is the main focus, whereas the decision making is minimalized. So in sports, all the different sports that we're going to talk about, there's a cognitive component, right? You got to think about what you're doing, but it is the movements of the body that is the main focus. Whereas think about like doing like arithmetic and calculus or physics or stats or whatever math classes. Oh, you guys had like quantification or human, what was it? Quantifying class or whatever. That class. We had to do like learn the different like, math. Obviously, when you're writing stuff down or doing equations, there's a motor component to that. You got to write it down, but the majority of it is happening cognitively. Yeah, quantitative reasoning. All right. So you guys see the difference? Whereas, look at these two things, right? Chess, you're moving pieces, but it's heavy in the cognitive contribution. Whereas with here, she's doing powerlifting. She's obviously thinking about what she's doing, but it's the movement that's the main focus of the skill. So motor skills versus cognitive skills. So is this actually a thing, Jaden? I thought that it was just a joke for the show. The next term that we're going, okay, yeah, fair enough. Jaden likes chess. I'm more of a checkers person. The next term we're going to learn is actions. Actions is the same thing as skill and motor skill. Okay, so of the 3 definitions that we've learned so far, they all mean the same thing. Okay, one thing, the next definition that we have to understand is very important, and I'm trying to think of a way that what's a motor skill that I can have someone do, like 2 different people can pull up their cameras and then show us to do something. Okay. Is anyone willing to put on their videos? Or do you want me to come up with something? Okay, so Jonathan, what I want you to do, so we got Johnny and Sam. Johnny, you're going to go first, and what you're going to do is you're going to look into the camera, and you are going to put on a hat, something simple. Put on a hat, touch your nose. Can you think of anything? Anyone in the class? What I want to show is that.
Oh, do the pat the head and rub the tummy. That's a good one.
All right, do it. So then, well, no, it's got to be something like really quick. Because the point of what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to ask you both to do the same thing, but we're going to notice that both of you are going to do it differently. It doesn't mean you're not like achieving the same skill. You are, but people will achieve this skill with different movements. So, can you put on your camera, or is this going to work? Like, do I have to stop presenting, then you put on your camera, and then I got to re-present? Oh, wait, you guys are on right now? I don't see you guys. Let's try this. Oh, well, I don't know what. Okay. So present. Okay, we all see them? We all see them? Okay, Jonathan, here we go. What I want you to do is I want you to pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. Nice. Yo, he's been practicing. Okay, Sammy, you got this. Okay. So I was pretty impressed with both of you. I think that you both should start a TikTok showing this. And you'll go viral. But class, what are some of the things that we noticed about those tasks that was different between the 2 of them? Anyone? Yeah, the execution. Okay, so I'll tell you one thing that I noticed. I think John went clockwise, and then Sam went counterclockwise when they're rubbing their tummy as they're patting their head. Yeah, and Matthew was right. They use different arms. So would you say that they both performed the skill? Yes, they both did what they were asked. But what's one thing about motor skills? You can use different movements to achieve the same skill. And that was the issue with research, is that, well, like, how can you say that Sam did it better or did it right versus what John did? You can't. If I'm asking, someone to pitch a baseball, and one is pitching overhand, the other is pitching sidearm, but they both hit 100 miles an hour, who's better? You can't. And so what research had to do was they had to come up with a term to say that even though we're both achieving, or 2 people are achieving the same skill, they're both utilizing potentially different movements. So movements are the individual motions of the body that the individual is choosing or doing while achieving the skill. They both achieve the skill, but they're doing or using different movements. Do we all get that? I feel like what we're going to do is we're going to have Sam and John just compete all semester long. in a good way, as long as they consent. So you guys understand the difference between movements and skills? Awesome. So we needed a term, right? We needed a term to describe that. And so in that note, there are, so you could say that the interaction or the relationship between movements and actions are many to one, meaning that a single skill or action goal can be achieved under a wide range of different movements. And individual movements like hip flexion can be used in a wide variety of different skills. Like hip flexion can be used in walking, running, jumping, dance, all of that stuff. And then when we're looking at it from a neuromuscular perspective, neuromotor processes is the last term. Neuromotor processes is talking about sort of like the motor recruitment patterns. So the neuroanatomical and neurophysiological mechanisms of movement. So how we activate our different muscles. And so that can also be a many-to-one relationship in that there are a large number of different firing patterns or neuromuscular processes that can be achieved to can be utilized, sorry, to achieve the same goal. So when we're talking about kids that are uncoordinated to start off with, but are still trying to achieve the goal, and then as they get better and more efficient, obviously they're more coordinated. So neuromuscularly, something is different in the control. So there's a large number of different neuromotor processes that can be utilized to achieve the same goal. And we, in motor control research, is looking at how that changes through experience and learning. How's that, guys? Is that too fast, or is that material too difficult? I just want to take this moment to give John and Sam a round of applause. That was excellent. Of course. Awesome. Team. Okay. So now let's get into the last part of the lecture. And now we're going to talk about the classification of motor skills. So initially, researchers were trying to figure out, like, what is the difference between the control aspects of different types of skills? So is like learning to type the same as learning to jump? Is the control processes behind that similar? Is that like, is it all just one way that we control things? And so what they had to do is they first had to try to figure out a way to classify different types of motor skills. So this type of motor skill is controlled this way. This type of motor control is controlled this way. And so the initial way to do that was one-dimensional systems. That is what we're going to talk about now. And they needed to classify motor skills to, like I was saying, try to figure out the similarities or identify the similarities or differences between different types of skills. And then they would better understand, once they can like group things together or classify them, they can study different variables that affect that type of skill. And then this will give us sort of a basis of understanding how the body controls movement, but also gives us a basis for like rehab or treatment or training or coaching perspectives. So we're going to learn about the 3 one-dimensional systems that were created initially, and then we're going to talk about Gentile's 2-dimensional taxonomy at the end. So the initial one-dimensional systems that were developed to classify different skills is like either A or B. Started off really early in research, and the 3 main ones that were developed were the size of the musculature involved in the skill, the specificity of the beginning and end, and then the last one was the stability of the environmental context. And these 3 one-dimensional systems were mentioned in that video, but we're going to briefly discuss them now. The first one, or a way to classify motor skills, was as fine skills versus gross skills. Gross skills would be defined as those skills that require the use of large musculature, and then fine motor skills would be defined as the ones that require small muscles to achieve the skill. And so the idea would be that fine motor skills are like involve hand-eye coordination or small movements or accuracy, whereas gross motor skills would involve like large, powerful movements and be things like more like sports. Because they would say that, okay, well, when we do fine motor skills, we tend to slow down because the skill would be, or the goal would be accuracy. Whereas with gross motor skills, it tends to be the goal is power. The problem with one-dimensional systems is that things are never really black and white. They're always sort of in a gray area. So obviously, these one-dimensional systems that we're learning were a good starting point to start with analysis, but the skills that we would choose to evaluate were always somewhere on the spectrum between gross and fine. Does that make sense, everyone? Awesome. Not really. So, so you can put on your mic, Olu, and ask the question.
Oh, sorry. I just looked at. Understood now. I just looked at the slide.
So you're good?
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Okay. So the second one-dimensional system was the specificity of the beginning and end of the movement. Now that sounds a little bit difficult, but this one-dimensional system wants to classify motor skills as either discrete or continuous. What's the difference between me picking up this cup, drinking, that's the motor skill, versus me running a marathon? Now, with drinking a cup, it would be considered a discrete motor skill because there's a specified beginning and end. Whereas the act of running, where does running start or where does running end? Because it's multiple repetitions of the same thing. It's continuous movement. So Olu's right that the difference is the amount of movement. How do you classify what the beginning of running is and the end? And me controlling a discrete skill like picking up a cup, flipping on a light switch, kicking I don't know, kicking something, versus me performing a skill that has no set beginning and end, a continuous skill. They have two different sort of like processes. When you're walking into class, are you thinking about every step? Or you just kind of start doing it and then you start thinking about other things? Whereas when you're doing a discrete skill, you tend to be focused on that one specific thing. Two different motor control processes. And so what research looked at was trying to define or classify motor skills as either discrete skills or continuous skills. But like all one-dimensional systems, they fall somewhere on the continuum, where skills can be part discrete or part continuous. Like with a marathon, there's a beginning and end to it, but what counts as the motor skill? One step cycle, or is it the whole thing? It's hard to sort of describe. Does that make sense, Olu? Awesome. Everyone else good? C, Cesar. Okay, the last one is defining motor skills by their environment or the environmental context. So classifying them as open or closed motor skills. Now, remember when I gave you the example of what is harder to do or more difficult to do? A free throw or a jump shot when there's a defender on you and you're moving and fading away? Which one's more difficult? The ones that are exactly the fadeaway, because you're sort of like you're timing your movement with the environment. Things in the environment are moving, and you have to accommodate your motion for those factors, and that's much more difficult. It requires more processing, and so the environmental context is evaluating the features of the environment that will interact or affect your movement, and that's like the supporting surface, objects in the environment, and other people, and if things are in motion. If things are in motion, you have to time your motor skill to the environment. Whereas if it's a closed motor skill, it's self-paced. You get to choose when to perform that skill. Like if I want to pick up this cup, nothing's moving right now in the environment. The supporting surfaces, the objects, and people in my environment are not moving. So I get to choose when I pick up the cup. Whereas if someone was sliding it to me, now some things are in motion. I have to time my movements with the environment. I think the example that I used in the other class was hitting a baseball off of a tee versus getting a ball pitched to you. Which one's more difficult? The pitch one, because now you're timing your batting motion to something coming at you or something moving, versus in t-ball, nothing's in motion. So closed motor skills are those where the environment, so the supporting surface, objects, and people in the environment are not moving, and it's called self-paced motor skills or movement. Whereas open motor skills are when the things in the environment, the supporting surface, the people, and the objects are moving, and so you get to time your movements to that. So it's externally paced. Oops. And like everything, it open and closed motor skills. Sometimes we're sort of on the continuum, but this became popular in rehabilitation and coaching fields, because if you want to stepwise teach someone how to do something, it gives you a level of difficulty. So you start off with closed skills and then you progress to open skills, because you develop, with the repetition of an easier setting like closed skills, and then you would sort of progress to moving environment. Question. So closed motor skills are stationary variables, whereas open skills are changing movements. Exactly that. Yeah, correct. No, we're almost done the lecture. I wanted to finish up with talking about Gentile's two-dimensional taxonomy. Taxonomy is a way to classify motor skills. So that's this was a way that was developed, or sort of a table that was developed to classify different motor skills. And it was very popular in a rehab setting. It was developed for physical therapists to be able to classify a movement and sequentially learn how to make things more and more difficult. Because in a rehab setting, I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with occupational therapists or inpatient physiotherapists in a hospital, where a lot of the rehab is related to their activities of daily living. So any one of you in the class, if we were going to develop a list of the things that a patient couldn't do for their daily living, something like brushing their teeth, how do you develop a treatment program or a training program to teach someone how to brush their teeth? Difficult to think, right? Because as we know, the best way to train someone is you start off easy and you get more and more difficult. So how do you do that with toothbrush? Exactly, sequencing, and you have to grade it. Perfect. So Brianna and Michaela, you guys are right. And Samantha's, yeah, they are all our occupational tasks, right? And the reason why this two-dimensional taxonomy became so popular was because it was a way to do that. It was describing things or classifying things on two axes. So here we have what the taxonomy is. See how we have two axes, the environmental context, so how things are open and closed. The function of the action just means like the type of motor skill. But by evaluating these variables, it classifies a motor skill, so grading it, like Michaela said, it classifies it into one of 16 different boxes. And the interesting thing with this taxonomy is once you did that, you can make things more difficult by, like, it gave you a guideline to make things more difficult. So you could either go this way or this way. So let's say we classify a motor skill that they're doing, it's 2B. To make it more difficult, you can go to 2C or 3B. So now all of a sudden, the taxonomy was really important in the rehab field because it gave therapists a way to classify, grade, and then sequence the order and how they can make like an exercise harder. Does that make sense, everyone? Because then the next little bit of lecture, like the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk about how to use the taxonomy. So we also know that there's two axes, right? One is going to be based on the environment, and one's going to be based on the skill itself. Remember I said at the beginning or midway through the lecture that there's three variables that affect our ability to perform a motor skill. What were the three of them? The environment, the skill itself, and then the person. So the one thing that this taxonomy is not looking at is the internal factors. But let's talk about these axes. So first we're going to talk about the environmental context. So remember I said that when we're looking at the environment or things that conform our motion or their ability or the movements that we use to achieve the motor skill, we're looking at the people, objects, and the supporting surface. That's called the regulatory conditions, things that we have to alter our movement to achieve the motor skill. Non-regulatory conditions are things in the environment that don't have a direct effect on movement. So if I'm performing a motor skill in a really bright room versus a room that's dim, that doesn't mean things are moving or not moving. It may make it harder to do things when it's darker, but that has no real effect on my movement or has no impact on the movements that I would use. Whereas if I'm trying to shoot a basketball into a hoop, someone being there is going to affect how I got to arc my shot. So when we're talking about the environment for the taxonomy, we're looking at the regulatory conditions, the supporting surface, objects, and people. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at whether or not those regulatory conditions are moving or not. And then with each repetition of the motor skill, whether or not the regulatory conditions change. And I'll go into what that means. But what that does is it gives us 4 different possibilities. So when we're looking at the y-axis of the 2-dimensional taxonomy, we're going to look at the skill. We're going to look at the environment. Are the regulatory conditions in motion or stationary? And then with each repetition of that motor skill, do the regulatory conditions change? So when I'm playing golf, for example, if I'm playing golf on a course, nothing's moving when I go to take a shot. So I take the shot, goes down the fairway, I walk up to it, and then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do this motor skill again. Except this time, now the pin, maybe the sand traps, everything's in a different location. So there's inter-trial variability. There's variability in the regulatory conditions every time you do a repetition of the skill. So that this obviously makes it more difficult. Do we all get that? Awesome. The x-axis in the 2-dimensional taxonomy is talking about the function of the action or the actual skill itself. And so what we want to look at is whether or not the body, so the person's body, the person performing the motor skill, if they are stable or in motion. If they're in motion, you obviously have to process more things, so it makes it more difficult. And then the last thing is whether or not we're manipulating an object. Because the act of having to manipulate an object with your hands or like on your feet, if you're playing soccer, for example, it adds a level of difficulty. So with this part of the taxonomy, we still get 4 different options. Sorry, down here. First, we're going to look at whether or not the person is stable or their center of mass is stable or they're not moving, or if they're moving, if they're being transported, so they're riding a bike, they're running, they're moving, and then whether or not they're manipulating an object in each of the cases. So we get 4 different difficulties. So when you combine them together, that gives us our 16 different levels of difficulty of a motor skill. So let's practice. Who wants to go? Black, Ryan, Olu. Olu, you want to do it? How would you classify this skill? So we'll say this is a free throw, okay? Because we've talked about free throws a lot today. Let's go to the taxonomy. How would you classify shooting a free throw? Let's start off with the y-axis. In the environment, are the regulatory conditions moving or not moving before the start of the task? Yep. So nothing's moving, right? Because the floor's not moving, the rim's staying there, right? Nothing's moving. So yes, it is stationary. Now with every repetition of the free throw, Are the regulatory conditions the same? Does the ball change in size? Does the distance from the hoop change? Does the hoop height change? No, exactly, Sydney. Cesar, everything. So there's no intertrial variability. So that places us on this row. Now think about the action itself or the skill. Is the body moving as we're doing this? No, so we obviously, when we're doing a motor skill, we're going to move our bodies. But in the beginning, as we start, we're staying in one spot. So in the case of, if regular basketball would be body transport because the person's moving around as they're doing certain things. But with a free throw, the person's standing in one spot. Do you guys get that? Because it would be harder to shoot a free throw or like a shot while you're running versus when you're standing still. Enjoy the Spanish. Well, because it's at the beginning of the skill. So obviously every motor skill is going to involve movement. We're not talking about the movement of the body segments per se. We're talking about whether or not the body center of mass is in displacement or not. So in this case, the body would not be moving. So it's stable. And then are we manipulating an object? Yes. So then free throw would be 1B. We can go through a bunch of examples so you guys get it. Okay, what's the next one? Oh, okay, golf. So this is playing golf on a golf course. JP, I'm going to get you to do this one. Okay, so with playing golf, is the environment in motion or stationary? So the pin, the places on the ground, the ball, stationary. Yeah, so it's stationary. So the one thing I want to say is that there's always some gray area with this taxonomy that like Casey may consider different things than JP would, but if we're the one doing it, we'll tend to perceive it the same way. So it's just like a scale. Each scale will tell you a different way, but if you're using the same scale, you can still use it to monitor change. Same thing with the taxonomy. So yes, wind would potentially change certain things. It would change the way the shot's going to go. But the regulatory conditions, so the supporting surface, the objects, and the people aren't moving. So everything in this case would be stationary. Now, with each repetition of doing the golf shot as you go down the fairway, is there intertrial variability? Are the regulatory conditions changing each time? Yes, yes. So we're in this row right here. So JP, with the skill itself, is the body stable or moving? Nope, so the body is stable in this case. Because remember, yes, we're going to move our body. We're going to move our limbs to hit the ball. But see, like I'm like, right? My base of support is not changing. I'm staying in one location. I'm moving, but I'm not changing in position. Whereas when I'm like playing basketball, let's say I'm playing basketball, I'm moving around, right? Yeah, yes, 100% right. If it was Happy Gilmore, that would be body transport. He made it more difficult. It's scheduled until 3:30, but because I just am having a good time, we can keep going. Unless you want to cut off, Benjamin, you can. Yeah. Sweet. I mean, my patient is waiting, but I think he's learning at the same time. Okay, so then, so JP, we're not moving, so we're stable. are you manipulating an object? Like, is there anything that you're manipulating? Yes. Yes, Sydney, that's exactly correct. Yes. So then it would be 2B. Perfect. Okay. Almost done. We just got to we'll do one more example, and then we'll do the poll to figure out when we wanted to do the tutorial times. Sorry, the drop-in times for the labs. Who wants to give me a motor skill? Think of anything. Long jump. Okay. So Jeffrey, let's go through this together. I'll go Jeffrey first. Is that okay? Long jump. So Jeff, in long jump, is the environmental regulatory conditions, are they moving or not moving at the beginning? Answer. Oh, you answered. Stationary. Yep. And then with each trial, do the regulatory conditions change? I think a long jump is the same, right? Yeah. So then, okay. Now, is the body moving or not moving as we're doing it? Here we have a difference. It is moving. And then, are we manipulating an object? No. So we are 1C. Who else said something? Tennis. So Jacqueline was talking about tennis. So Jacqueline, in playing tennis, not a tennis serve, but playing tennis, is the environmental regulatory conditions stationary or are they in motion? You could argue for both, I guess, but I would say in motion. So let's say like two people are like rallying. The ball is in motion. The other opposing player is in motion. The net's not, but the thing, yeah. So I would consider it like this. With each repetition of hitting the ball or playing tennis, is there variability? Yeah, because every time they rally, it's going to be in a different location. I would say that there is intertrial variability. Is the body moving? Yep. And then are you manipulating an object? Yeah, so Jacqueline just gave us a 4D example. But do you see how like there's a gray area, right? If I was asking you on a test, it would be more specific to like, okay, think of this situation. Is the environmental context stationary or in motion? It wouldn't be like, okay, is this a 5G or a 5G? Is this a 3C or a 1B? I would never ask you that. On the assignment, you will have to use this, but it's an assignment, so you'll have it in front of you. So we'll just finish up now. I appreciate you guys staying late. I like that we're engaging, and I'm hopefully giving you guys some good examples to help you sort of learn the material. Is there any more questions in relation to the material or the course before we do the poll? No? Okay, let's figure out how to do a poll. Oh, the exam is cumulative in this case because it's everything kind of really builds on each other. It's not like neuroscience where it's just like compartments. It will be cumulative because there's stuff that's talked about that the whole time. Okay, let me just check I'm gonna do a poll right now. Let me just check. The options are 9, 10:45, and 1. Okay. That didn't work. Oh, polls, yeah. Okay, start a poll. Option 1. What was it? 9 to 10:15. Sorry, guys. 10:45 to 12. 4, 1, 2. Yeah. So I'll just clarify. So remember how you guys all had your scheduled labs on a certain time on one of the Monday or Tuesdays, and it was one of like week 1 or week 2? We're not doing that anymore, right? Because it's all sort of virtual. But what we've decided to do is that we'll have a drop-in session where you guys can log in to a Google link with your TA and ask specific questions, just to help develop a little bit of like Q&A with everyone. These guys will probably all have the same questions. So let me start this poll. What we want to do is, do we want to have, so the one TA is Monday, one TA is Tuesday. So it depends on if you guys remember which day you were on when you signed up to the class. Would you want the drop-in time from 9 to 10, 10:45 to 12, or 1 to 2:15? So, lab drop launch. Go. So this would be on Monday or Tuesdays, depending on whatever you had picked when you enrolled in the course. So obviously all labs are all virtual now, but the drop-in time will be based on the day that you had chosen, Monday or the Tuesday. That doesn't mean you can't ask the TA questions all the time or ask myself questions. This is just a way to have the Google Meets link up so you guys can all do it together if you so choose. Oh, I have to. Look at this team. We're all just helping each other out. It's a really good squad. Really make big things happen today and in this course. Okay, so the winner, I don't know if you guys can see it, but the winner is 1 to 2:15. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So, guys, I ran out a good time. I hope you guys had just as good of enough time. JP has labs on Wednesday. No, that's the lecture. Yeah, probably. Yep. Then just go the other day. Okay. Guys, I had a really good time. Thank you for spending a little extra time with me. I hope it was worthwhile. And any questions, always feel free to email me. And I will see you guys next week. Okay? Bye, everyone. Bye, Karen.
Have a nice day.
Bye, guys.
Anthony,
I mean, bye,
just
people.
wanted to let you know you're on your way to becoming the best Nick in the faculty.
Ooh, I think it already was.
And, you know,
Thank
I'm
you.
watching. If you
Thanks,
keep
buddy.
talking about LeBron
Thank
like that, I might have to switch it up. But you're getting there.
It's true. I can't be cocky. I gotta be, always willing to improve.
Of course. Have a great day. Thank you for the lecture.
Bye, guys. Bye, guys. I mean, people. Sorry.